Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce, a lot of you already know Mr. Guest, but he took over for Mr. Scott after Mr. Scott finished 31 years of teaching. And this makes me feel old, but I started 26 years ago, and I started at Penn Hills at Linton Middle School. And Mr. Guest was actually a trumpet player in the middle school band at Penn Hills when I started. But I've known about him for years, and he's done an awesome job. It's a pleasure to work with him, so please welcome Mr. Guest.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody feeling? That's right. And how's everybody feeling? There we go. All righty. Our next piece, we're actually going to slow it down for you. It's called Prospect. It was written for a high school group. What grade are you guys in? This is 7th grade band. It's written for a high school group, and it is known as a hymn for band. So it emulates a traditional hymn, but it was written originally for a high school band. Here is Prospect. All right, it's audience participation time. Our next piece for you is a Carl King march, and it's called Coast Guard's March, and it honors our American Coast Guard. But traditionally in marches, we engage the audience. So at the end, after the trio and the fight strain, if you don't know what that is, look it up. Or come ask me, I'll tell you. I'll nerd out forever about this stuff. But after that stuff, you're going to hear the main theme, which is the trio, but then the audience gets to clap. Now here's the catch, you have to clap on beat. Okay? So I'll turn around, I'm going to give you the biggest cue ever. Okay, and then we're going to clap together. Can we do that? Huh? All righty. Here is the Coast Guards.
Okay, our last selection by the 7th grade band. Before we do that, I just want to say how proud I am of the progress this group has made. I remember what we sounded like on the very first day of band this year compared to where we are now. And we've all made some great strides in the music. So how about a round of applause for these guys? Can't wait to see how good we sound by this time next year. But the last song we're going to play for you is highlights from the Star Wars saga, some great music by John Williams. And there are several little tunes you'll recognize from that. It's actually music from Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. It starts out with the Imperial March, which of course is Darth Vader's theme. And then we'll hear Princess Leia's theme, followed by Cantina Band, which is the little scene with Jabba the Hutt, and then Han Solo and the Princess, and then we will finish it up with Star Wars main theme. So we hope you enjoy highlights from the Star Wars saga. Grade band. Hey, welcome to the middle school jazz band portion of the concert. These guys have done a great job. We've been doing jazz on Mondays forever, and Mondays have just become a day for some reason that every time we miss school, we're always missing Mondays. So it's like every long weekend's a Monday, and then so we've had less rehearsal time this year, I think, than any other jazz band we've had since I've been here. But these guys have really come together, and super proud of them. We have a lot of soloists tonight. The first song we're going to play for you is called El Rey del Sol. I'm not like bilingual or anything, but I did look that up on Google, and apparently that means the King of the Sun. All right, so enjoy that. It's by Gregory Yasenitsky, and we have a bunch of solos on this. We're going to have Sid Rugvan on trumpet. We're going to have Luca Azara on alto saxophone, Connor McKinnon on trumpet, Miriam Bell alto saxophone. We have Jay Cancelman on trumpet, and Nigel Wrestler on alto saxophone. So this should end probably sometime around Sunday afternoon, I imagine, all the solos. So enjoy that. Okay, everybody, here we go. It's a nice Latin tune. Feel free to tap your feet or dance a little bit in your chair. Here we go. singer. Got my very first lead singer. Hey, how about another hand for those soloists? That is not an easy thing to attempt the first time, because you're really putting yourself out there to play wrong notes. So you really gotta, not be afraid to get out there. The more wrong notes you play, the more you get comfortable with it, and then you play kind of less of those. But if you're really like into jazz, there are no wrong notes, all right? My college roommate at WVU was an alto sax player, and he always said in jazz you're only a half step away from salvation, which basically means that any note that sounds horrible, if you play a half step in either direction, it's going to sound better than the one you played. So no, they did a great job. So the next song we're going to play for you is called "The Boy from New York City." It was a song from 1964. I don't know if you ever heard of them, because this is the first time I'm hearing about them when I Googled this tonight. But the group was called the Ad Libs, and they made this song. It's a medium swing. And we have a bunch of solos on this also. We have Jay Cancelman on trumpet, Miriam Bell on alto sax, Sid Raghavan on trumpet, Luca Azara on alto sax, Blake Lavange on drums, and Nigel Ressler on alto sax. Here is "The Boy from New York City." Okay, there's no possible way that any of these students could know more than me, so just want to say that. A couple of these guys came up to me and they said, you know what? It's like, we want to play Billie Jean. And I'm like, Billie Jean? That's not like really a jazz tune. I'm like, I'll see if there's a jazz version of Billie Jean, figuring there probably was never a Billie Jean jazz version written. And turns out there was a version. So we got it late in the game because I had to wait for it to come in. We didn't already have it in our library, but yeah, it's awesome. I have to admit they were right on this one. So great tune. We don't have any soloists in this one. I just heard a big sigh of relief from about 3/4. But anyway, enjoy this. This is our last song. This is Billie Jean by Michael Jackson off of the Thriller album.
our 8th grade portion. We're going to start off our 8th grade band portion of the concert with Sharp 9, written by Omar Thomas. He's one of our leading composers nowadays in the band world. And Sharp 9 has to do with the jazz start, so we're segueing right out of the jazz band into another jazz piece. It emulates a second line band from New Orleans. Everybody say New Orleans. New Orleans. Okay, New Orleans. That's how you're supposed to say it. At least that's what somebody told me. But it's an interesting setup. It's not traditional, like there's a trumpet part, clarinet, flute part. It's split up into 5 separate parts, and every instrument is playing most of those parts. So there's trumpet players on part 1 through 4, there's flute players on 1 through 3, so on and so forth. Okay? The tuba players sort of always are the upright bass emulators. But actually, it's not even an upright bass. Traditionally, in New Orleans style Dixieland music, it was a sousaphone. Okay? So it's the second line. It has to do with the actual marching. So when we're talking about funeral processions, they would process to a slower song. That's at the beginning of the funeral, and at the end of they would celebrate the person's life. Sharp 9 emulates the celebration. This will have 4 soloists. We have Luca from the alto section. We have Sid from the trumpet section. We have Nigel from the alto section, and Jim Hassan. Okay? And you will hear backgrounds played by the entire group. Here is Sharp 9.
system filled out, so it's just, I got 4 kids, so I don't have a problem. The next song we're going to play for you, and this is another one of those kid suggestions that didn't want to admit they were smarter, but we ended up doing it. So where's Jason? Jason Sturgeon, at the beginning of the year said, I really want to play Jurassic Park, so I looked and we found this arrangement. So we're going to do themes from Jurassic Park. Of course, that's 1993 film, music by John Williams. And I just looked this up, but there's now 7 movies, I guess, in the Jurassic Park series. But I hope you enjoy. This is Themes from Jurassic Park.
Our next selection for you is the Three Airs of Gloucester. It's English folk songs that they created 3 distinct movements for. It comes from the area of like jolly old Chumley. That's where the Hugh Stewart got his inspiration from. So there are 3 movements. It's a fast, slow, fast type of thing. So please do not clap between the movements. Here is the Three Airs of Gloucester. This is a middle school masterwork.
is our last song of the evening. Before we play that for you, I just wanted to tell these guys and you how proud I am of the progress this group has made as well. Really great group up here, and most of them are going to move on with us to the marching band next year and the band program at the high school. And we're going to be doing some pretty cool trips and stuff up there and making some great people. So excited about that. This stuff here can't happen without a few people involved. So just want to, first of all, I'm going to have these guys clap for all the parents. So kids, clap for your parents. This couldn't happen up here. There's a lot of time involved in things like instrument rentals and instrument purchasing and private lessons and making sure they need to be when they're supposed to be there. So thank you. Also, our co-workers down at Eden Hall who prepare these guys before they get up here to us and do a great job down there. So how about a round of applause for all of them. While we're at it, we'll throw a special shout out to Mr. Nicodemus because Mr. Nicodemus is retiring at the end of this year. So we appreciate all the stuff that he's done to help us continue the band program headed in a positive direction. So thank you to him. Also, our PR administration and school board, we appreciate all the support we get from them. And also, Steve Karpinski's here tonight with PRTV and does the live streaming and the sound and the lights and all that stuff for us. So how about a round of applause for that? Okay, the last song we're going to play for you is a collection of songs from the James Bond movies. The title of it is James Bond Returns, and these are the themes that you'll hear. There's the James Bond theme, then Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die, and You Only Live Twice.